The end is once you get taken away, you go to Ponar to die. Nobody comes out of Ponar alive.
My father said, you can try to imagine what you can't imagine it. All we thought is that someone will survive and tell the world what's going on, what happened here.
In the heart of Lithuania lies a city. Before World War II, it was called Vilna by the large Jewish population who lived there.
Vilna was one of the most important cities in Jewish history, certainly one of the capitals of European Jewish civilization.
And just beyond the city is a killing field few have ever heard of. It was here, in Ponar Forest, that roughly 70,000 people, Jews and others, were murdered and buried by the Nazis. It began as a fuel depot built by the Soviets early in the war. Construction was halted when the Nazis invaded, and the unfinished pits were soon put to much darker use. After the German invasion, the Nazis brought the first Jews to the site, where they were lined up and shot.
Before Eichmann sat in Berlin at the Wannsee Conference and proposed extermination camps, this was the tipping point. Because at this place, they began systematically killing the Jews in pits, processing them in the same way that later the extermination camps would make famous. But it began here, where people left their clothes on the side and walked to the pits, and they began killing 500, 600, 700 people per day. This is ground zero for the final solution.
But the horror of this place was not yet over.
By December of 1943, the Nazis knew that the Russians were on the border, ready to take back Lithuania, meaning the people had been shot and they were kept in these burial pits, but they now needed the evidence to disappear into ash.
The Nazi solution was simple. Only a few thousand Jews still survived in prisons and smaller labor camps in the area. They gathered the healthiest and brought them to Ponar, not to be shot, but to work. They were known as the Burners Brigade.
They did work for quite a long time. They used to burn, he said, about 200 corpses on each layer of wood, of logs. And they used to put like 10 layers, so it was about 2,000 corpses plus or minus a day.
He said that in one big hole they counted between 22 to 25,000 bodies.
People and himself dug out people that they recognized. He recognized his family by the way they were dressed. He recognized his wife. I think he found his two children, I'm not sure.
And in December, January, they all realized, those 80 Jews, 76 men, 4 women, that when they're finished, they would be the last victims. So they hatched a plan.
The prisoners began digging a tunnel in the back of their small shelter.
My father said they were digging with the hands, with spoons we found on the bodies, with screwdriver.
On the last night of Passover, in April 15th, between 9 o'clock and 10 o'clock, they got out. From the bunker, across 100 feet, a small 70 centimeter by 65 centimeter, just big enough for one person to slide through each one behind the other. They knew that there was great danger, but they were going to try to get through the forest without making too much noise. But they made noise. The Nazis started shooting them. It is one of the most horrific escapes that we have in the Holocaust. But it also is, the great testament to the courage and survival.
Of the 80 prisoners, only a handful survived the escape. For decades, their stories were the only proof of the tunnel's existence. Until 2016, when an international team of scientists scanned the ground at Ponar and found the long-lost escape route. At last, hard proof could be added to the oral history of these survivors. Now, even as the last witnesses pass on, the world can never forget this early chapter of the Nazi genocide, right here in the forests of Ponar.
This was their protest. They were not going to go as sheep. They were going to get out, they were going to tell their story about a place like this. Yes, this is ground zero for the final solution, but it's also the beginning of understanding what it is that the human spirit is capable of.